Greetings. It's Monday, December 23rd, in the almost ended year of 2024. I'm Thomas Caldwell of the Aurelian Column, and this is the Monday Morning Report. Okay, now, the drone hysteria seems to be doing what it was always going to do, and that is die out. Although it was obvious there was something going on in the early stages of this rather interesting phenomena of this rather interesting year. And this reporter does think that it was something tied to a system that got loose. What we have now is, I think, a conspiracy to sell a lot of drones to people for Christmas. I can't tell you how many times people have misidentified the planet Jupiter and the planet Venus as drones that I know of. But it says dying all down in all the stories about what was going on, what people have heard, what quote-unquote sources are saying. And whenever anybody says that, take it with a grain of salt, believe me. But the drone phenomena, the drone fest of 2024, seems to be finally dying out. Well, it seems like a long time ago, given everything that's going on, but the assassination in Moscow of General Krylov of the Russian army, he's the man in charge of biological, chemical, and nuclear weapons and investigation and defenses, was blown up by a bomb planted allegedly by Ukrainian intelligence, which almost certainly had something to do with NATO and more probably the United States. But we're dealing with statecraft here. The Russians were able to find the perpetrator. They're good at stuff like that. But the Russians pretty much stayed their hand. When I heard that happening, I thought, oh boy, I wonder what NATO base is going to get hit by one of these new missiles they have. What the Russians do, though, is stay their hand because they, like most of us, are waiting until January 20th to see some sanity return to the world. However, they did obliterate the Ukrainian Secret Service headquarters in Kiev, and that was apparently their retaliation, and they're talking a pretty tough game. But if you follow the Russian news media, they are very much looking forward to Donald Trump returning to the White House, and probably anything short of an overt military invasion, they're gonna be patient as much as they can be. They're being the adult in the room. Oh, in the meanwhile, Israel is, moving into Syria. They've obliterated the military infrastructure of Syria, or what was left of Syria, and they've moved into sacred territory. We've covered that already. But at the same time, Yemen, and I know they keep blaming this on rebels in Yemen, but Yemen hit Tel Aviv with some ballistic missiles of their own. That's a pretty good distance. That's pretty fancy hardware for a bunch of guys in the desert wearing robes carrying AK-47s. So this is pretty much a war report because World War III is pretty much on. Israel has a massive public relations campaign going on right now. They're good at that as well. In Germany, a Saudi Arabian plowed his car into yet another Christmas market, killing several and injuring many. The numbers really don't matter anymore because people in Europe have gotten used to this as they've introduced people from drastically different cultures that, by definition, hate their own, to somehow think they could contribute to their society. Well, this is what you get, folks. This sort of thing has happened here in the United States, although the Europeans seem to be more, they put up with stuff like this a little more, and they shouldn't. There's a lot of rumor about in Washington, and this is not so much rumor as it is different parts of the Biden administration, the deep state, floating ideas through the mainstream media, much of which I am not going to address because I'm not going to be doing their work for them. But anything coming out of the mainstream media right now, just about anything except maybe a plane crash or something that's obvious, take it with not just a grain, take it with a few pounds of salt. There's a lot of misinformation flying around right now. But some reality, though, the Biden administration is sending more money to Ukraine. It's $1 billion and so dollars, or $1.8 billion or something like that. That money, of course, if you really think it's going to go to help Ukraine, well, it's most certainly going to be laundered somewhere to end up in the bank accounts of all sorts of interesting people who are probably already packed and ready to go. As soon as Trump comes into office, Ukraine is pretty much gone, and so will the people that have been running that sad state of affairs for so long. One must take into account that even though Donald Trump is being given so much of a mandate, he's going to have so much to deal with when he gets into office that if you're looking for miracles, you aren't going to get them. So one of the concerns I have is that everybody's looking for the new administration to come in less than a month and wave a magic wand and everything's going to be nice and the Russians are going to be at peace with the Ukrainians, the Israelis will stop doing what they're doing, Iran will, I'm sorry, it's not going to go that way. Never in American history has an outgoing presidential administration done so much damage to the incoming administration, adding on to all the damage they've done over the last 4 years. There's a lot of talk of pardons. I don't know if you followed up on my report last week on all the pardons that Joe Biden has already passed out. It was a very significant number of people. And if you look at some of these cases, you just can't imagine why they were let off. There are, of course, reports that there are more coming. I think that's a certainty. You look for some very famous people who have no charges against them getting blanket pardons for things they may or may not have done. When are people going to realize exactly how corrupt the deep state is? Well, there are a lot of people that have taken resent to Elon Musk, who is the world's richest man and wants to see the deep state go. At least that's what we're being told. I'll tell you what, folks, when Trump does get in, when he does get into the White House, you are going to see him do what he does, and that is make deals. There's even talk this morning about the mass deportation not necessarily happening. You'll know for sure how serious he is if the January 6 hostages have been released. One of the first things he should be signing at his presidential reception after he takes the oath of office is a whole bunch of executive orders, including that one. If that doesn't happen, well, all bets are off at that point. I don't want to sound pessimistic, but there's so much of a mess that's being piled up on what this guy is going to have to deal with. I don't see how he can possibly move ahead and get anything done of significance without making serious compromises. The government was almost shut down, of course. You were following that very closely. One thing that has come out is that I've heard of people having get-togethers, real physical get-togethers, going over pieces of pending legislation, almost as a joke, but with the interest of possibly addressing it with their members of Congress. This is really shocking if it's actually happening, and I don't see why it wouldn't. We have House.gov and Senate.gov and PDF files you can download and print or at least look at on a tablet and talk to your friends about it. The information age could be backfiring on these people. Anyways, they did come up with a spending plan just in time before the government was going to shut down at midnight on Friday. That would have been fun for a lot of us, but in reality, when that does happen, it costs an awful lot more money to start things up than it does to just continue them. The U.S. government finances are a total mess. They have been for a long time. Do not look for them to get better anytime soon. What needs to be done is the feet of every member of Congress has to be held to the fire, and every bit of legislation that is introduced should be downloaded by all of us. It should be a daily routine. Go up and see what they're doing. We have to know, and they have to tell us. They can't get away with everything behind the scenes, so why don't you just take that up as a hobby? Go out, grab a bill from the websites, put it on your tablet, go to your local tavern and start reading it with your friends. Who knows, maybe you'll start to see something like the original Sons of Liberty that originally met in taverns in Boston, and when they were reading and talking, well, that's when things began to happen, and I think there is a need for things to happen in this country big time. Back to Syria, the wife of the former president of Syria, Mr. Assad, Mrs. Assad, is supposedly filing for divorce. She's a British subject. She was born in Britain. I don't know if she's renounced her citizenship, but this report is being denied by the Kremlin. There's also reports that they're basically being held prisoner effectively. They don't have any use anymore for anybody. The Russians will probably give them a nice little apartment somewhere if they want that. I don't think the guy's going to have a palace. It's something that belongs more in the supermarket tabloids than the regular news. But Syria has devolved into chaos that's not being covered too much by the mainstream media. And if you don't think that heads are being chopped off at this very moment by somebody, well, I have to ask you to get a reality check. That part of the world is not in any way, shape, or form going to look anything like a liberal Western democracy in anyone's lifetime at this point. Not going to happen. So why bother? Now, there is one good possibility of a fine use for the U.S. military that has been floated by the Trump camp, and that is to retake the Panama Canal. I'm not joking. The Panama Canal was signed away by the infamous Jimmy Carter back in 1977, I believe, or 78. And it was completely given up by Bill Clinton. The 1-2 punch of two Democratic presidents. Really, the Democrats have not had a decent president that hasn't made a mess of things since John F. Kennedy. I mean, really? I mean, has anybody figured this out yet? But let's go back to the Panama Canal. That, up until the American moon missions of the 1960s, was considered the greatest technological achievement of the United States. Teddy Roosevelt, arguably one of our best presidents, came up with the way to have it done. It cost thousands of American lives. An American Army doctor by the name of Walter Reed was able to come up with a way to treat yellow fever, thus the medical center that's named in his honor. The Panama Canal was a peaceful, beneficial, globally beneficial endeavor, and it was done by the United States. It was ours. That territory was U.S. territory. And we just tossed it away in the name of progressivism and liberalism. Well, you know what? Panama is now a mess. One of the justifications is that they're charging enormous fees for things to go through it. It's a very corrupt, backward filth hole, which can be said for much of what goes on south of the Rio Grande. But going back and taking it over again and annexing it, or re-annexing it, that would be a great idea. I think that's a fantastic idea. Forget Canada. I mean, Canada, yeah, who needs it? We can get maple syrup in the United States if we need it, but Panama Canal, if the U.S. retakes that and American flag ships are allowed free passage, that would do wonders for the American economy. The Panamanian military would be no match for even a small contingent, and they would probably welcome the stability and relative lack of corruption that would result. So there would be a real nice thing. We could reclaim it, call it the state of Theodore, named after Teddy Roosevelt. They don't make presidents like that anymore, do they? There you have it, folks. An American military adventure that would be worth it. That's it for today. If you appreciate my work, please like, subscribe, share on social media and by email. Share with your friends and share with your enemies. I welcome any communications. I can be reached at feedback@aureliancolumn.com. That's feedback@aureliancolumn.com. I'm up on X. My handle there is MICCAMPEN. That's MICCAMPEN. The Aurelian Column is up on Telegram. I'm on other social media platforms, but not Facebook. This podcast originates at Substack. The address there is aureliancolumn.substack.com. Until we meet again, be good, be safe, be vigilant, and remember, Clown World and the Deep State must be destroyed. Good day.